video we're going to show at Mesa. And this is great because obviously we don't just want talking heads for the entire video, so we can take some of these pictures and other pictures that we're looking for from people's personal collections, and we're going to put them in as still imagery with the voices over them for the video for the final product. And then the whole video we're going to keep in the Mesa archives with some of the others that we're doing, and so they're going to be accessible for future researchers to go back and review them and sort of look at the development of the field and contributions of different individuals to the field.
And it's so important, Ludwig, because you're Mr. Afghanistan.
Well, number one and number two.
Exactly.
Mr. Middle East here,
Yeah.
because we started it and they thought we'll never be funded again. When we applied for a center. Well, I shouldn't say that now. We can see it afterwards.
Yes, definitely. We'll be getting into that. So
Okay, what I'm going to do, this is for me. That's going to help me sync these up.
Do I look neat?
You do. No.
This is what we have. We have a microphone for you here. And so, hi, Lyndall. So, and you're fine. You're not in the frame.
Okay, great.
And so when you talk, you're okay. But just if you raise your hands up, I can see them.
Okay, I won't.
So Lyndall will ask you questions, and you can just answer directly to her.
Yeah.
Ludwig, start by introducing yourself.
Big one. Start introducing myself.
Introduce yourself. Say, I'm Ludwig Adamec.
Huh? Okay.
And do just talk directly to Lyndall.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to start.
Should I start? Okay. I'm Ludwig Adamec. I came to the university in '67. I thought I'll try it for 2-3 years. I came from California, and I thought California is the greatest. And I'm still here. So I taught history of the Middle East, Islamic institutions, and Arabic at one time and Persian at one time, until we got somebody to teach it full time. So gradually we were able to expand. We were part of the Oriental Studies Department.
Yes.
And in 1975, the Department of Education was no longer funding Oriental Studies Department, so we had to apply individually, and that's when I applied for the Middle East. I was funded, and there were only 6 or 8 centers in the country.
Wow.
And East Asia and South Asia was also funded. However, they eventually lost funding because I guess nobody was willing to do the work. It was a lot of work, just like your work here at Mesa. It's a labor of love as well as anything else. So anyway, here I am.
No, thank you. That's great. And so maybe if we could go back a little bit and start with how you became interested in studying Afghanistan.
Well, I always wanted to see the world, but I never had the money to do it like people normally do it. So I just went without money. And I hitchhiked, and I went all over the Eastern Arab countries, Iran, Turkey, of course, and eventually on to India and even beyond, and East Africa. For 2 months I was in no country because I was traveling as a deck passenger by ship between India and East Africa. And when I arrived in East Africa, the immigration said, "Yes, who are your bankers?" I said, "I don't have bankers." "How much money do you have?" Well, I said, $15. "And where are you going?" "I'm in transit to Canada." And they said, "Well, how are you going to go to Canada? I said, don't worry, I got all the way to Thailand and all over the Middle East, and but they didn't like that.
I'm
So
sure.
I wasn't permitted to land. I was permitted to go out while the ship was there. But all the way to South Africa, back over Seychelles Islands to India. And in India, when I wanted to get out, they said, no, you left India. You can't come in anymore. So the shipping company put me on another ship. And because this ship was going to leave to Africa again, the Indian said, you can't do that, you have to take him again. So I went again to Africa, to all those places. Anyway, I finally, when I returned to India again, I was able to go back to travel back to Europe. And I rested for a short time. And since I hadn't been to Afghanistan before, I decided I have to see Afghanistan. And I earned a fabulous amount of money of $75. And I made it to Afghanistan. I still had $1 when I arrived in Kabul. And it just happened that there were some German and Austrian engineers who were setting up American equipment, electrification plant in Herat, and they needed somebody to translate maintenance and installation instructions, and I got the job, and I was there for 2 years in Afghanistan, was an assistant to the mayor of Kabul, who was also the head of the Afghan Electric Company. And after 2 years, since I already had a visa for Canada, I thought I would try it this time. And I went to the American Embassy, and I said I'd like to have a transit visa. And I was an Austrian citizen at that time. And he said, well, why don't you get a visiting visa? I said, oh, okay. I got a visiting visa, and the man who gave it to me was there. He wasn't doing this job regularly, so he didn't know some of the rules. I got the visa by mistake, and I came to America.
And is that how you ended up coming to the U.S. To continue your schooling, or is that another part of sort of the story? So when you came to the U.S. that time on the accidental visa, did you then start with your PhD work in California?
Well, at first I traveled all over the country. I was 3.5 years as a tourist, always extending my and I went to settled in Los Angeles eventually, and I applied to both UCLA and Southern California. In those days, it was UCLA for foreign students was $50 a year.
Oh my goodness.
Southern California was $7 a unit. So, but I somehow liked UCLA better. And when I got there, they had the center started, von Grünebaum Center, and that's where I got my PhD.
Sorry, can I jump in for just a second?
Yeah.
Do try not to be.
I'm sorry, I know I'm
yeah.
really trying.
No, it's okay.
Because the microphone picks up every time I agree or sort of make
Oh,
a.
okay.
So you can nod,
Okay.
but don't.
I will nod, but I will not. Okay. Okay. No, that's so interesting. So, did you know Professor von Grunebaum before you came to the U.S. or
No.
so that was the first time? And then
Yeah.
you worked with him for your PhD. Is
Yes,
that correct?
yeah. In fact, I went with him to Michigan when he was first elected outgoing president.
Of Mesa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People didn't like him
Really?
because he didn't see the faculty there. And he just came in, and anyway, he was. So he was voted outgoing president. And I taught a seminar at the time. It was in summer, '66. And the result of the seminar was a book published by the Center of Michigan Middle East Center. So then, '67, I came here.
Okay. Yes, as you said. So, just a couple of questions about your work with von Grunebaum. From what I have read and sort of the recollections, he was noted for his interdisciplinary approach, so encouraging sort of working across different disciplines. What are your thoughts about Middle Eastern studies as a field, a discipline of study, or do you see it as an area studies program that borrows from or encourages study in these different disciplinary areas, bringing together Middle Eastern experts?
Well, we had all foreign professors at the center from Europe, Germany, and France, and they had a different type of the European type of teaching was really guided study. You say you want to do this, or do you know Italian? No? Well, come back when you know Italian.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of thing. Also, von Grunebaum told me when he studied Arabic, first day of Arabic, they gave him a manuscript and a dictionary and say translate. No, you can learn a language many ways. So in doing that, you learn vocabulary. Of course, you don't learn to speak or to understand it, but this wasn't important for the Orientalists. You were supposed to be able to read. And at UCLA, in Islamic studies, you had to have French and German, and Arabic and Persian. Or if you were in Turkish studies, Turkish. So it he didn't have many students. And like most of the European teachers that used to come, they came in, started teaching and left, started talking. Time is up, they left. There was very little interaction. Von Grunebaum had a secretary. She was the dragon at the cave. If a student wanted to see him, it was very difficult to get to see him. And if you could see him, and you talked, and when his face dropped, you knew you better stop. So anyway, now in my case, there was nobody who knew anything about Afghanistan. So I didn't really get any guidance. However, I did do my research in archives, at the National Archives of India in Delhi, and at the India office. At that time it was in the Foreign Office, and the German archives. Most of the German archives were microfilmed by the Allies, but there were some things on Afghanistan which they weren't interested in, which you couldn't get. So I was able to get that, and I was lucky to be the first after the war to get access to the archives, and to also get permission to infringe on the closed period. I had to submit my notes in India to the Ministry of Education, and in London to whatever authority, Foreign Affairs, and then they would send it back. In India, you couldn't rely that they would send it back, because there was one before me who sent in about 1,000 pages of notes and he never got them. So all his work was. Now I knew that something like this could happen. So anyway, I avoided that mistake.
So they were worried about political things?
Yes. Especially the Indians. They didn't want revolutionary activities in India. Somehow these were the freedom fighters. But for them, when they read revolutionary activities, well, that sounds bad.
So did you have so you've done a lot of very original research in a variety of archives. Did you have a favorite or a favorite experience from that archival research?
Well, the Indian archives were the best. The government of India had more money, and everything was printed out, while in London it was scribbled here and there, and it was a mess, really. You had to really search. The German archives, of course, what was photographed was easy of access, and those things that I copied were also printed out, so it was easy to work with that. And while there were the only books that were done on Afghanistan were done by Britishers who had access to archives and who were involved, and they didn't really spill any secrets. So we know the general events about Afghanistan, the Anglo-Afghan wars, etc., but nobody knew quite the details. And that's what I got in the archives. And when I published 2 books, they were published into Persian in Afghanistan, and then into Urdu also. And anyway, was news to Afghans, and this sort of helped me to be persona grata in Afghanistan. In fact, by all the regimes, including the communists in the end, because there was something that could appeal to anybody.
No, that's so interesting, and great. Did you notice over the years, as you continued to do work on Afghanistan, did it become easier to gain access to the archives? Were there fewer restrictions, or did it get worse?
Well, on what I did, foreign policy, I used everything that was available. So nobody has done Afghan foreign affairs since the 1960s when I started, simply because there was no news. What people could do is use some conceptual framework, this or that, but couldn't really bring anything interesting news about.
No, that's so interesting. So then I want to talk a little bit about move into. So we joked earlier saying you are Mr. Afghanistan, but you really are the most noted academic in Middle Eastern studies working on Afghanistan, one of the only. And you spoke a little earlier about how you came to study Afghanistan and your experience there. How have you been received in the field? How do you feel about the place of Afghanistan as geographically part of Middle Eastern studies, and how has that experience of working on Afghanistan in the field of Middle Eastern studies been for you?
Well, living there for 2 years, I was able to learn Persian. I could speak the country, their language, and got to. The Afghans were very hospitable people, very friendly. They aren't anymore, but they used to be. And it was people liked living or visiting Afghanistan, and there were hordes of young people who would go on then to Nepal and places where they could get the stuff they were looking for, and so there was a great deal of tourism during the monarchy, the early periods, and it was peaceful. There was the advantage of a monarchy was that the king wanted to remain king. He didn't want the Sunnis to tyrannize the Shias. He wanted all his subjects to be happy or satisfied or not angry. So there was a general peaceful situation, and the government was also interested in modernizing. In the 1920s, there were three rulers in the Middle East: Kemal Atatürk, Reza in Iran, and King Amanullah in Afghanistan, and they all followed more or less the same process of modernization. Not as radical as Turkey, but establishing and being friendly to modernization and to adopting European or American Western ways. So it was easy to work there. The Afghans didn't normally let anybody see the archives, but since I already had material from the Afghan archives, they were then looking in the archives to find that material, and this led to opening up of the Afghan archives also, because when they saw various things that was news to them, they searched the archives, and I'm sure they were no better than the London archives, so it took them some time, and they whatever they found that I had, they were searching for, and so it generally stimulated work on Afghanistan. However, the archives are even now, well, the various regimes since then, some things may have been lost, and So I don't know what is now available.
And how were you treated, not in Afghanistan, but in the U.S., within the academic community? Because you focused so exclusively on Afghanistan, was there a lot of openness within the academic community here towards seeing that? Or did people feel that you didn't belong in Middle Eastern studies because they didn't see Afghanistan as part of that?
Well, I include Pakistan, Pakistan also in the Middle East, because Islam, the culture, the Arabic being important, as well as Persian. So, let me see. What was it you were saying?
No, I was just interested in how the rest of the the rest of the academic community.
Okay, the great impetus was the Sputnik. When all of a sudden the Russians were the first to get up there, Congress said, we don't know what's going on. We have to support the study of critical languages. And that's when centers were established. There weren't enough people to teach Middle Eastern or various other things. So they were imported from Europe or wherever. And we had the beginning of centers in this country. And pretty soon, of course, America was able to do much more than European university did or were willing to do. So America was able to catch up quite fast and become one of the dominant countries in that kind of research.
And you came to the University of Arizona in 1967 from California, you had said, to teach. And you stayed, and then in 1975 you applied for and received Title VI funding to establish a center here at the university. So we were hoping that you could speak a little bit about why originally you decided to come to Arizona, and then a little bit about that process of bringing in, of opening a center here at the University of Arizona. It's not the most likely of locations that people would associate with Middle Eastern studies.
Yeah. Well, when I got my degree, there were still jobs available. And I decided it's close to California. Somehow I thought I would be going back to California sooner or later. And when I was offered a position, sight unseen, I thought I'll try it for a short time. And I came. At that time, we had one person who taught Middle East history and Arabic, Wilson. And I was to teach also Arabic and history, and in addition Islamic studies and Sub-Saharan African history. So we were part of Oriental Studies, which included East Asia, South Asia, Middle East, and Judaic studies. We, in 1975, we were told there will be no more funding for that kind of centers. So whoever wants will have to apply, and I did. And at that time, I think we were 6 or 8 in the country. And our university wasn't very sanguine about it, because they thought competition, a whole country will never make it. And somehow we made it no matter what, and survived until now, 50 years after celebrating your establishment.
No, I mean, it's amazing, and as a student, I'm very thankful for that. So before we talk a little bit about Mesa, I just have a couple of questions about your experience. So you spoke a little bit about the difference in sort of the European Orientalist tradition of you occasionally saw your advisor, your instructors, you had 5 minutes until they sort of made a face, and then you had to go and figure things out by yourself. That's not been your process of teaching, and so what advice do you have for graduate students going forward?
Well, in those days, in Europe, they still had the old system. At age 10, you had to be good enough to go to the academic high school, get the Matura, Baccalaureate, and then on to the university. Like in Europe, like in other countries in Europe, PhDs weren't very frequent. A great scholar like Albert Hourani never got a PhD degree. And people were happy to get study under him. So the problem in Europe was the Orientalist approach, reading knowledge, no speaking. I mean, not that it wasn't desirable, but there just isn't enough time. And when the Arabists met at a conference, they couldn't use Arabic as a discussion language, so they had to use English or whatever. So the European approach in those days was different. It was for, as I mentioned before, it was really self-study, guided study for PhD degrees. And the lectures were something you attended or not. They didn't check whether you attended a lecture or not. And you didn't have to take your exams at a certain time. You could postpone it, which led to many being permanent students because they never felt quite ready. Now in this country, first of all because Sputnik, etc., there has always been an interest, what can you do with it? Now if you're an Arabist and you can speak Arabic, you are not an Arabist. And of course America was interested in reaching out to, and this was not just the Islamic world, but virtually every country. And I know there were somebody, a German, he studied Afrikaans, which is essentially a German dialect. Wasn't much difficulty for studying, but anyway, it was virtually, there were so many critical languages that Armenian, what have you, Turkic languages, etc. So it's in this country it was what you want to do with it, and I was interested in politics, contemporary politics, and therefore I sort of was either going into political science or history. With my degree I could do anything. I could be a language teacher or a political science or historian, but anyway I didn't have to make that decision, and this was a good thing, because if I had been tied to a discipline, I would have taken history of whatever, and the requirements would have been less as far as languages was concerned, but and politics. So it was my degree gave better possibilities. I could choose what I wanted to be, a historian or political scientist.
That's so interesting, especially in this current sort of climate of having to have a disciplinary focus in order to go forward with teaching. I'm going to now move on to a couple of questions that we have about Mesa, and some of them are just sort of your opinion, and some of them are asking you about any favorite memories. So the first question that we have is, in your opinion and your experience with Mesa, what is the purpose of having a professional Middle Eastern Studies association?
Well, let me just say first how I started to get interested and wanted to have it here. I used to work in summer Mesa conference on various outreach projects, and Richard Bulliett, who was the executive secretary at the time, asked me if we wanted to take over. And I said, yes, we wanted to take over. Now I said this without really knowing whether this university was willing to do all that was required.
So you were also the spearhead behind bringing Mesa to the University of Arizona. Yes. Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, okay, that's great.
Can
wow.
you tell us that story?
Yeah, can you tell us that story first?
Yes, yeah. So anyway, I discussed this with what's his name, Bulliett. Yeah, and we, since being part of the Oriental Studies department, and since the center wasn't something the university established, something that came here by government funding, I didn't really have any influence to help this, and I told Steva, who was then head of the department, that this would be a unique opportunity. I mean, nobody knew, nobody could guess that we would be here for all those years. The idea was maybe somebody can do it for 2-3 years, and then somebody else would have to do it. So anyway, I got him to talk with the administration, and I have a correspondence there. He wanted me to continue to talk with them to see how we can organize it. And after some discussions, and the university decided, yes, that's a good thing. At that time, 1,300 members, and it wasn't a American, it was already then a world organization. So it was something that the university would think that would put us on the map, because people used to ask, how come Arizona? Well, I guess we were trying to do it and support it, and that's how it got here. And since Arizona is very much like the Middle East, when I published one of my books here, foreign policy books by University of Arizona, the publisher said, does it have anything to do with desert? And so I said, yes, it does. And it wasn't really the kind of book that Arizona would normally publish. But anyway, so we were seen as a kind of border university, which was interested into Native Americans and that kind of thing. And to get Middle East studies established here was something unexpected.
No, that's very true. That's so interesting. Yeah, I had no idea that Mesa came to the U of A that long ago and under your tenure as well. So then just a couple of questions about your experience at Mesa. And part of this project is also we want to, we're taking these recollections from some of the founding and original and significant members of Mesa and trying to sort of put forward to like the younger academic population why being a member of Mesa, why coming to Mesa has been important, especially in your academic development, in your development in the field. And so do you, we were wondering if you had any favorite memories from a Mesa conference?
Well, one important thing is the conferences got people together. You may have read books of this or that person, but didn't know the person. So during Mesa meetings, people could meet, could talk. The papers and that kind of thing wasn't really as important often as the personal contact. People would decide to cooperate on projects, and people got to know each other. Before that, people might know somebody by reputation, but Mesa afforded the possibility of getting to meet everybody who is somebody in Middle East studies. And for students, of course, it was extraordinary because they also could talk with people and attend the lectures and meet their own peers, their own students, colleagues. So this was one of the, I think, very important functions.
Did you have any specific collaborations that came out of a Mesa meeting?
Well, we established a national outreach committee. Dr. Sheila Scoville, she started it, and it was a national council, and it was helping outreach coordinators at each center and also at any university that had or wanted to do something on the Middle East, how to reach out to the community, how to promote things, movies, various things for the general public, not necessarily academic stuff. And of course, this was something, it was very, very attractive to people. They could come once a week or twice a month to see a movie on some Middle Eastern topic, something they never heard of, but they got interested in, and helped them to understand what's going on today.
Yeah, it continues to be so important. I know that our center and others do such essential work in that outreach area. We've also heard tell that you met your wife at one of the Mesa conferences. You met your wife at one of the Mesa conferences?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Would you mind telling us that story?
See, we got married at the Mesa conference, and her daughter also got married at the Mesa conference.
Oh my goodness.
At different ones. Well, when I met my wife, first at the conference in was it Oregon or Seattle? In Seattle, she came to me. She was angry. She bought a Who's Who that I published, and I misspelled her name. And she said she bought the book, the $65, expensive in those days, and then she looked, and so I said, "Oh, sit down. Let's." I was able to appease her, and I succeeded. Then I met her again at a conference in Boston at a time when I was chief of the Afghanistan services of the Voice of America. This could have been a new career, but I decided to come back to the university. I wanted to write some more, so I was there just a year. And she was in New York, and we got to talk and visit, etc. And she once came to Arizona, and when she saw the sour oranges, she smelled it. Oh, Jalalabad, it's like Eastern Afghanistan. So I wondered whether she married me for the sour oranges, or no. We used to throw them away, and the Afghans collect them if we have visitors. So anyway, we when I decided to leave, I proposed to her, and she decided to come. Now it happened her mother was the daughter of King Habibullah, Afghan king, and Amanullah, the great modernizer, was her mother's brother. And because in the Middle East, men get children forever, so some children are 40 years old, and the other one is 5 years, and they are so anyway, she I guess because I was well known in Afghanistan, and she was given permission from her family to marry me.
That's so lovely and so sweet that you met at a Mesa meeting. It's,
Yes.
Yeah, it's
I
really
have
lovely.
to hear.
And the
I'm
same-
sorry to jump in. I
same
have to
with her
hear the
daughter.
wedding stories.
Her daughter also, at one meeting, I don't remember which one it was, but and they were married by their professor. They were in New York University at the time. He was also there, and anybody can marry you in Islamic law. So they. I didn't really think of it. So we are very much tied to Mesa.
No, that's so lovely. And what?
Do it, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Why did you and your wife decide to get married at a Mesa conference?
Well, it was a good opportunity. I would have to. We got married at the conference, but then we had to register it. And I remember we had to go there. there were only us two and two relatives of hers. And the man in a big hall, nobody there. And he said, anybody who objects or has anything to say? There was no, it seemed a little ridiculous, but anyway, so we had to register afterwards. Now for I don't know what they did after their marriage.
No, that's so sweet and so lovely, and possibly a unique story for Mesa. We'll have to go back and look and see if there are any others of those. Okay, so I have just one more question, a couple of questions about Mesa, and then I want to talk a little bit more about you, because you had just said that you worked for Voice of America for a while, and so that touches on one of them. But the first question that I have is, so you've obviously had quite a bit of experience working in Mesa, in the system, and with Mesa. How do you feel about the resources provided by the organization? Is there anything that Mesa could do better to better support, both outreach efforts, but also to support academics and to support bringing together people?
Well, since I was tangentially connected with Mesa, you have gone way beyond where we started. You have, so I would say you couldn't have done better than you have, and I think you are the major outreach organization for Middle East studies in the world. Anybody who wants to be involved in Middle East studies would have to get involved with Mesa, either as a member or anyway attend meetings or subscribe to publications of Mesa. So we are, and I say we even though I'm not Mesa, we are doing a great service. It's the greatest outreach that anybody does for Middle East studies. And of course under our leadership, past two leaderships, we have been very much lucky, and we have been gotten good feedback that our executive directors are very efficient people and are able to do what we never thought we would be able to do. So my only I'm only happy that I could, at the very early point, very early time, do something to help it establish here. And of course, nobody needed me after that. You know how to do your business.
No, and then sort of building from that, so you had mentioned earlier Albert Harani, who is considered one of the greats in the field and didn't have a PhD, but had a lot of experience working in different areas of the British government and for British foreign policy. You yourself spoke about your initial exposure to Afghanistan being working in Afghanistan, learning the language there, learning about the culture through a job, not through academic study. And then you just mentioned that you worked for Voice of America for a while, so moving outside of academia. So you have this experience both inside and outside of academia. And I was wondering how you feel, what your perspective on the academic field, how it is or is not enriched by those outside experiences versus solely remaining enclosed within itself and only promoting academic study and remaining within the field as opposed to working outside of it? Okay, sorry, it was a long-winded question. No, so what we're interested in and sort of where this is going is early on there was a lot of professional expertise brought into the discipline, brought into Middle Eastern studies, from experience during the Second World War in the military and other governmental and policy services, to yourself working with oil and other development infrastructure. And more recently, you see less of that crossover, and it's primarily people who have only studied the field, even if they've visited the Middle East, and they don't really have that experience outside working professionally. Do you think that your experience working in Afghanistan, working in journalism, in newspaper, did that enrich your academic experience? Did that make you a better academic? Or do you think it was a distraction?
No doubt, yes, it was important. And, very important also was the Peace Corps. Mm. Many people, young people, were sent all over the world. They lived there for a year or two or whatever. They very often learned the language. And when they came back, we had a much greater pool of people with interest in many parts of the world and with already some language expertise. This was important. We, because the great obstacle in something like Middle East studies is you have to study languages that are difficult. Arabic, I studied only classical Fusha. I never spoke Arabic, but I had to be able to read it. Persian I could speak and read, and if necessary, write. But so the thing is, it is many people never knew where Syria was. Suddenly they got there in the Peace Corps. And then once you've been somewhere, then you come back. Whenever you hear about Syria, you can sort of put it together. It reminds you of something. So this way, with Peace Corps, globetrotters like me, who just traveled and stayed here or there, and this was a much easier way of getting into the field than coming out of high school and deciding I'm going to take a bachelor's degree in Middle East Studies. Sounds too forbidding, too scary. Huh? Arabic is scary for everybody, so Persian is easier. But again, you can use any kind of vocabulary, Arab vocabulary in Persian, because depending on your sophistication, on your education, you can show that off by using a more Arabic vocabulary in your Persian. So anyway, the contact.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. I have just one more question on my list, and that is, there's been much discussion in recent years about the meaning of non-political in MESA's bylaws, and so I was just wondering, you've spoken a lot about MESA's place as a premier, place for academic study, as an important organization for outreach on Middle Eastern issues to the general community. Do you believe that MESA should remain a solely academic organization, or would you like to see it, or do you think that its place needs to evolve and sort of adapt?
Well, I think it should remain academic. largely, but that doesn't mean it can't do outreach and deal with the community in general. Let's see, I was going to think of something.
It's also a matter of the way one takes the word non-political.
Oh yeah, okay. The problem of Sputnik and Congress was that centers and all this innovation of studies of so-called critical languages were supported by the National Defense Act. Now, when I went to the Middle East in those early periods, in some countries where they are a little more touchy, they say, what, national defense from what? It gives a political perspective. Well, can't be helped. But the thing is, we shouldn't be involved in politics. We should present what is there, and we should do what you have been doing, namely to stay out of supporting this or that. Now you do send out letters every year when you find infringements on academic rights. And this, of course, is very important because those people who get heads of state, ministers, dictators, whatever, who get those letters, realize that they are being watched. And there is a very powerful organization that is watching them, and for better or worse, and I think for better, it is important, and it'll help.
Yeah, that's fantastic and a great way to end. Unless there's any lingering questions.
Would you like to? Is there something you'd like to add, Ludwig?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to say something in particular, or do you think you're done?
Well, yeah.
Any stories? I would love to know if there's any little maybe short stories or just impressions from Mesa that you think other people should know.
A favorite panel or speech or anything
I
like
was even thinking maybe like
Well,
if someone who had never heard of Mesa asked you to explain it, how would you do that?
well, I would say if you want to get married, attend the Mesa conference. That's what I did, and that's what my daughter did.
We have to use that as a tagline. I think that is
Come
the
to Mesa,
sweetest
get
story
married.
ever. That you,
Live
both
happily
you
ever after.
and your wife met there, and then her daughter met her
Yeah.
partner. That's
So
so
in
great.
other words, you can't expel me from Mesa. I'm tied too closely for that.
Oh, it's
No,
so
That's
it's
a
so,
lovely
it's so
story.
lovely.
And now
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to remind you of it because those things get forgotten.
It's too precious to forget.
No, and that will be forever memorialized in the Mesa archives now. So
Okay,
it
thank
is
you.
on record for forever.
No, I was moving like this. I wonder whether I moved out of the camera.
You're
and-
perfect. No,
Yeah.
I had it all set up for you to
Yeah.
move, so
Yeah.
you could be
You were
yourself.
Yeah.
That was
Thank
wonderful.
you so much.
And
Yes.
I love the story of arriving in Tanzania or Kenya
Yeah.
with $15 in your pocket, and there's